Tonight, a final farewell to Brian Mulroney, the state funeral for Canada's 18th Prime Minister. A nation's goodbye to one of the country's most consequential leaders.
He had a huge impact 40 years ago. He had a huge impact 4 years ago.
A family's private grief in public view.
He was the one who carried me to bed and stayed with me when I fell asleep.
The depth and devotion, how history will remember a man motivated by service.
Mais qu'est-ce que j'ai à tant aimé?
Plus, failing to prevent a deadly attack despite warnings.
It sees its attack as sort of a revenge.
The extremists claiming responsibility for the mass shooting in Moscow. And Canadian cancer survivors react to a royal revelation.
My heart went out to her.
Well wishes pour in for the Princess of Wales.
CTV National News with Heather Butts, reporting tonight from Montreal.
Good evening from the heart of Montreal, where an outpouring of emotion was felt across the city today and the nation, celebrating a lasting legacy. The former Prime Minister Brian Mulroney laid to rest. A procession from St. Patrick's Basilica honoring his Irish heritage to Notre Dame Basilica, where friends and family paid tribute to a leader they say helped shape Canada today. Our coverage begins with CTV's Quebec Bureau Chief Geneviève Beauchemin.
Centuries-old Notre Dame Basilica has seen history unfold before, but Canada's farewell to its Prime Minister today marked a notable chapter. Invited guests joined the Mulroney family, politicians, of course, but also business leaders, actors, and sports figures. People whose names filled Mulroney's Rolodex as he so famously worked the phone to build bridges around the world. Caroline Mulroney, the daughter who followed her father's footsteps into politics, says her dad would have been touched by the outpouring of love.
Well, he didn't care for polls. He did like good headlines. And those of the past few weeks would have pleased him immeasurably.
But she also spoke of his love for his 4 children and their 16 children.
Je vais chanter. Je vais chanter.
Through emotion, one of those grandchildren, Elizabeth, paid tribute.
I'm going to sing my papa's favorite song. Qu'est-ce que j'ai à tant l'aimer que ça me donne envie de crier sur tous les.
There were nods to some of Mulroney's policies that once raised the ire of Canadians, the GST, free trade. Today, many praised his political courage that boosted Canada's profile on the world stage.
And in one of his greatest moments, Brian Mulroney united all Canadians with pride and resolve as he and our nation helped Nelson Mandela take the first walk to freedom.
When Irish eyes are smiling.
And during a rendition of the tune that he so famously sang at the Shamrock Summit with U.S. President Ronald Reagan, Mulroney's voice echoed through the Basilica.
When Irish hearts are happy, all the world seems bright and gay.
And of Mulroney's ability to bridge divides, it was perhaps a hockey player, the great one, Wayne Gretzky, that put it best.
In politics and hockey, you fight, you battle, you drive. I'm so proud to be a Canadian today to see past prime ministers here, the current prime minister. That's what our country is all about.
Gretzky also honored Mulroney's generosity, his sense of humor.
Then he goes, young man, remember 1993? That was a great victory for the Montreal Canadiens, right? And I said, sir, I was on the other team. That wasn't so great for me. He goes, no, but it was wonderful for the country. I go, okay, great, good for you.
But I know we'll meet again.
Laughs, tears, and tributes. All part of the moment when Canada said its final farewell to its 18th Prime Minister. Mourners said today that Mulroney was destined for political life from a young age and that he loved this country with all his heart. Heather.
Devoting his life and career to serving Canadians. Geneviève, thank you. A statesman and a businessman, Brian Mulroney was a savvy lawyer and accomplished negotiator. Here's CTV's Jeremy Charron on his ability to build up countless companies.
His book had many chapters, and while his political career may have been the cover, his business chapter was just as impressive.
As chairman of Québécois, he was a tremendous source of inspiration and courage.
Brian Mulroney praised today in a eulogy by the CEO of the Quebec telecom giant to which he was chairman.
His sense of humor was an integral part of his magic. For Mr. Mulroney, we were the best managers. We were the best directors. We were the best board. And obviously and accordingly, he was the best chairman.
Quebecor was far from the only business he helped bolster. A lawyer by trade, Mulroney returned to his roots after politics as a senior partner at a global law firm.
He was sought after by clients all over the world, principally for his incredible judgment.
Described to have a passion for winning, losing simply wasn't an option. Mulroney lived by that principle until the end.
My partners across the country would attest to you that he was active until weeks before his passing.
He was also a mentor in the business community. This McGill professor recalls the impact he had when speaking to his CEO class.
And at the end, I stood up to thank him, and the whole class rose, thunderous applause. Has not happened before, and has not happened since. It was such a tour de force performance.
It's that performance that helped lead to his success. Chairman, board member, director, he was a businessman who wasn't afraid to pick up the phone, and when he did, he got things done.
Brian Mulroney played a huge role in shaping the way that many companies that we actually talk about in this country and beyond now look.
That look, the legacy Mulroney leaves behind in business.
His influence in Canadian business, his influence in global business, it is hard to think of any prime minister that achieved the same levels of success in the business world.
It's easy to overlook Brian Mulroney's achievements outside of politics. The title of Prime Minister is hard to beat, but it's clear in the business community, Heather, his accolades in that arena were just as admirable.
Thanks, Jeremy. Turning to other news, the number of people killed in the Moscow shooting massacre is now more than 130. While ISIS has claimed responsibility, the Russian president is placing the blame elsewhere. CTV's Kamal Kramali reports.
More bodies dug out from the rubble today, the number of dead from Friday's attack continuing to mount. What was once a concert hall just outside Moscow, now a burned-out shell, parts of the structure still smoldering. While family of those still missing wait for word. Gunfire erupted Friday at Crocus City Hall, the venue packed for a concert, when 4 gunmen started shooting, firing at point-blank range. News agencies reporting the gunmen then set off explosives. All 4 have been arrested, a total of 11 people detained. Russian President Vladimir Putin promising to punish the perpetrators, claiming they were heading to the Ukrainian border. Ukraine's president firing back, denying those claims. An Afghan branch of the Islamic terror group has now taken responsibility. Islamic State Khorasan, or ISIS-K, responsible for the Kabul airport explosions in 2021, killing civilians and U.S. soldiers. The U.S. had warned Russia of a planned attack.
Something obviously was missed, and whether, again, they didn't act on the intelligence the U.S. had, or they had other reflections of it but didn't do enough, that's something the Russian government's going to have to look at.
Growing bolder recently with an attack in Iran in January, killing nearly 100 people. Speculation it's had Russia in its crosshairs for its involvement in past conflicts.
Terrorism it sees in Syria against Muslims in Syria is going to be fuel for a long time. And those attacks still continue to this very day.
There are also intensifying fears that with ISIS-K now seeking new targets outside of Taliban-controlled Afghanistan, European nations may be under increased threat. Heather.
Kamal, thanks. The head of the United Nations is again calling for a surge of humanitarian aid into southern Gaza.
Choice is clear, either surge or starvation. Let's choose the side of help, the side of hope, and the right side of history.
Those comments made while visiting the Egyptian side of the Rafah crossing, where about 7,000 aid trucks are waiting to enter Gaza. The UN vote on a resolution demanding a ceasefire in Gaza has been postponed until Monday. Coming up, when a royal's health update hits close to home.
It's absolutely devastating. I was paralyzed with fear.
The cancer concerns resonating with survivors. Plus, the politician's playbook when bidding farewell. Nearly half of all Canadians can expect to hear a cancer diagnosis in their lifetime. Princess Kate's public revelation yesterday is resonating with some of them tonight, including those who've also brought their personal news into a public life. CTV's Tony Grace explains.
When Ellen Winters Robinson was diagnosed with cancer 2 years ago, the communications professional suddenly couldn't find any words.
It was absolutely devastating. I was paralyzed with fear.
Unable to decide who to tell and when, so the words of the Princess of Wales,
tests after the operation found cancer had been present,
truly hit home.
What part of it really resonated with you the most?
It was the look on her face. Tony, I recognize that look. You could see the trauma and the strain. You are fundamentally never the same person again after a cancer diagnosis.
Retired CTV News anchor Jane Pritchard also knows what it's like to go public with such personal news.
At first, you don't want anyone to know. You've got to deal with this. You've got to come to terms with it. You think of all the worst case scenarios, and then you look forward to getting better.
Both have written about their stories, but it's an experience many navigate in their own ways.
We are an aging and growing population, so every year it just means more and more cases.
45% of Canadians will be diagnosed with cancer. That's almost 240,000 last year. It's still by far the leading cause of death.
When high-profile people have certain diagnoses and talk about their cancers, it hopefully means more eyes on the research piece of it, which is so important to those of us living with cancer.
And so is this message of community.
Please do not lose faith or hope. You are not alone.
I'm sure that she will take a leadership role in the future in terms of sort of normalizing the discussion around this.
A discussion more younger Canadians are having as researchers try to unlock the mysteries about the number of diagnoses now happening under the age of 50. Tony Grace, CTV News, Toronto.
Still ahead on the show tonight. Lessons from a giant of Canadian politics, a look at relations with American allies.
To me, Mel, you know what? The most important thing in politics, as in life, is relationship. So you just need to do that and build bridges.
Canada's Foreign Affairs Minister sharing the advice given to her by Brian Mulroney outside his funeral here in Montreal. He has been called Canada's great deal maker. His ability to build personal relationships with American presidents not only built a bond between the two countries, it created a lasting legacy. Here's CTV's Washington Bureau Chief Joy Malbin.
There are few buildings more symbolic of the remarkable Canada-U.S. relationship than the embassy here in Washington. Brian Mulroney there in 1989 to celebrate Canada's new home on Pennsylvania Avenue.
And this building is dedicated to the friendship of the people of Canada with the people of the United States.
A friendship with ups and downs, prickly at times, a relationship Mulroney cultivated. As Prime Minister, he signed a sweeping free trade agreement with America and won an election on it.
A night of triumph for the Mulroneys.
But it was a battle at home. Fears jobs would be lost and Canada would become the 51st state of America. It was Mulroney's relationship with Ronald Reagan that in no small way helped pave the way at the 1985 Shamrock Summit. It all seemed a bit corny then, but the two leaders had great chemistry, charm, and shared a mutual respect. Mulroney even stood up to the U.S. president when the Americans refused to accept a dispute resolution mechanism that Canada demanded.
We almost lost that free trade agreement. Mulroney, to his credit, used his extraordinary goodwill with Reagan and insisted this was absolutely critical to signing. And Reagan, based on his friendship with Mulroney, went to James Baker and said, make it happen.
Free trade would go another round with Mexico. Again, Mulroney intervened, using his goodwill with now President George Bush Sr. to make it a three-way deal.
Getting the largest, richest, and most productive market in the entire world.
Frank McKenna had a ringside seat to it all as a premier and Canada's ambassador to the U.S., who knew Mulroney well.
I think he got America to look at us as good partners, and it turned out, it just turned out to be an achievement that will stand the test of time.
Recalling Mulroney's push to reduce pollutants that cause acid rain, lakes, rivers, and trees were dying, Mulroney once again used his access to the Oval Office to encourage the U.S. to clean up its own act. The only foreign leader to be asked to eulogize two American presidents, both Bush and Reagan.
One saw the quintessential Ronald Reagan, the leader we respected, the neighbor we admired, and the friend we loved.
And surely they would say the same of him. Joy Malbon, CTV News, Washington.
The ability to bring people together, a common theme. I had the chance to speak with CTV's political analyst, Scott Reed, following the service. We discussed today as a unifying event and the preparation required to deliver such important and compelling eulogies.
Well, a very difficult challenge because you're only going to be asked if you have a deep personal connection to the person you're memorializing. But in addition to that, you want to work in so much. And I thought that what came through was no matter how much politics there was at the podium today, it was the personal moments that really rang through. It was the personal conversational reflections of Wayne Gretzky. It was the personal remembrances that came from Carolyn Mulroney that were so moving. And then there was that unbelievably stirring moment when his granddaughter sang.
Mm-hmm. Anything else that you'll take away from this service and this moment in Canadian history?
Well, I really do think it reminds us that Brian Mulroney's contribution outlasts just pure politics. It wasn't washed away a year or two after he was out of office. Permanent structural change with the policies that he pursued and the political influence that he had, not just when he was in office, but for so many years after.
As we head to break, another look at a touching tribute from a granddaughter. Brian Mulroney had a transcendent ability to make friends and keep them. Arthur Milnes is among the lucky ones. He served as Mulroney's memoirs assistant for 5 years. Here's part of our conversation, reflecting on a professional and personal relationship.
I first saw him, I went to see a speech of his in my hometown of Scarborough at Birkdale Ravine in the 1984 election campaign. And then I met him again at Sir John A. Macdonald's grave in Kingston when he gave a speech. And had you told me those 2 times that I'd end up working on his memoirs, I would have told you you're crazy. And all those years later. And he signed a picture of me and him in high school, and it said, Arthur, who didn't know where this meeting would lead.
So fast forward to that time, what was it like to be the assistant to his memoirs?
Well, it was a ride through history that you couldn't have imagined. My job was to read every single piece of paper that went to his desk when he was the Prime Minister of Canada. And then we started to meet more regularly as he crafted the book. Brian Mulroney was the master of caucus. I got to read 9 years of his private notes for his speeches he would practice in front of caucus. And that was my great regret, that his greatest speeches were in caucus and nobody could hear them except the caucus.
What does it mean to you to have been invited here today to the state funeral?
I felt honored, but more importantly, I felt very proud as a Canadian to see the Mounties in red serge, and then that was a pretty stirring rendition of O Canada.
I know we'll meet again some sunny day.
Only Mr. Mulroney would have done that at the end, with the song of him singing that was it just brought the ceremony to a wonderful ending, and it was so Brian Mulroney. I just loved it.
How do you want him to be remembered?
Well, I think he'll be remembered anytime a prime minister does big things. He challenged us, and he sometimes took us to a place 10 years before we wanted to go there. Now, he liked headlines, but he didn't just get into politics for that. He knew he had a short time, and he wanted to do things, and he did.
That is our show. I'm Heather Butts. For all of us at CTV National News, thank you for watching. We'll leave you tonight with some moving moments from the state funeral for Canada's 18th Prime Minister. I'll see you tomorrow from the National Newsroom. Good night.